Morning, everybody. Hi, everybody. My name's Chester Louie. I'm actually one of the lead Chrome customer engineering leads based in Mountain View, California. For many of you that I have not met, I look forward to meeting you today. Before I jump into it, just want to ask a general question of how many folks are actually back in the office? Are the majority of you, I guess, on the West Coast or on the East Coast? I've asked this question in the past. I can tell you, being in California, one of the primary things I've noticed is there are definitely not a lot of folks that are back to the office. So we tried everything from giving away free snacks, massage points, you name it. We can't get people back in the office. So would love to speak to folks today to learn about what you're doing to really incentivize and get folks back in the office. Yes. The other thing is, I do want to highlight, I've been on the Chrome team for about 9 years. I joined in 2013. You may know our CEO, Sundar. He was actually our vice president of the product team at the time at Google. He also came from the Chrome Enterprise or Chrome OS part of the world. He's definitely one of the co-founders of Chrome. So just a real brief history of where I've sort of joined the team, where I've actually come from, and then as far as what we're going to talk about today, it's really the changing threat landscape from a security perspective. So I mentioned I'm part of the Chrome Enterprise team, and if you also, another question I want to ask is, how many folks are familiar with Chrome? So okay. How about Chrome OS Flex? Okay, so very few. So I'll definitely cover that in a little bit. So, but many of you know in 2008, there was a project internally called Chrome. It's your synonymous with your browser that you use to basically access HTML5 and JavaScript, right? The internet, the web. It's your portal into the internet. That was a project that Google started back in 2008, and basically in 2011, we then ported that over to a hardened version of Linux, right? So this is then Chrome OS. So many of you may have heard of Chromebooks. A lot of schools, universities leverage that type of platform today. The other thing I also want to highlight here as it relates to security is I mentioned that the threat landscape is changing, right? So everything from what we used to do in the past, which is you have to layer on everything from antivirus to anti-malware to putting on certain managing encryption keys. All of these things have changed. Part of the reason why we sort of went down this venture or this project called Chrome was to really eliminate a lot of these attack surfaces, right? So it's sort of, think of it as just a very thin layer. It's a platform that, once again, you have a lot less to manage. You have a lot less from a sort of attack and threat vector. So security as a whole, like I mentioned, is continuing to evolve, and IT has also dramatically changed and evolves. One thing that I think is really interesting is Forrester has also mentioned that compared to 3 years ago, 96% of organizations are more likely to be cloud first than they were. I can tell you personally firsthand from my perspective, working on not only the product and also the engineering team, that a lot of the requirements that we saw 3 years ago prior to the pandemic, the table stakes, things like video conferencing, it was a nice to have. Every conversation I'm in now, it's a must have. And there's no compromises. It's not like, oh, it can work a certain way. No, it has to work this way, or we're not going to select that offering. So we're definitely seeing it really on the Google side from a product offering. We're also seeing another interesting stat in a recent survey is that obviously 73% of folks really enjoy sort of this work balance of hybrid work. And I agree. I think flexibility is definitely a great thing because cloud, as we have heard, gives you full access to the apps and data that you really need, right? So that sort of enables flexibility as a whole for our workforce. At this point, I also want to highlight that for a lot of these companies to really move forward, there's an overwhelming majority of IT sort of leaders out there that say that, giving and enabling access anywhere, at any, sort of access to your data, access to your applications, it's not just important, but it's actually business critical. So one other point I want to make here is that, not everybody realizes this, but simply being cloud first, it's obviously great for security, but it isn't the only thing, right? And I'll kind of highlight what those points really mean. So, if you take a look at this, 94% of businesses, they basically reported significant improvements in online security by moving and transitioning, obviously, their data and information to the cloud. A good example of that is take a look at your traditional endpoint, your computing device. Everybody's got cell phones and laptops and tablets. What happens when you lose that device today? All right? There's a lot less to worry about if all of your information's in the cloud. And that's just one example. The ability to remotely wipe that device, that's very powerful, right? You can disable that device. You can run audits. The next time that device phones home, perform this action. So those are just some of the benefits and some of the evolutions of policies that have come across, from a mobile computing, endpoint computing standpoint. So like I mentioned, unfortunately, being cloud first isn't enough. And the landscape is changing. Failing to install security updates, that's a big issue. The risks of connecting to just open Wi-Fi. I don't know if you've heard about all of the risks behind doing that. How about this one? The intentional clicking on links in phishing emails and accidentally giving away your sensitive information. That's probably one of the biggest issues, I think, for more, a lot of the organizations that we, sort of work with is basically the human error portion of this. So this is, I know it's a lot to consume in the slide, but I'll promise you, kind of break it out into really 4 parts. What I'm trying to get across as a message is ransomware is now an industry, right? It was something that we talked about, I know, for many years in the past, but it's now an industry. And what I mean by that is this visual that you see here is just sort of the many layers, and I talked about the 4 layers of how ransomware attacks happen today. As you can see, to protect against ransomware, you have to focus on not only your business apps, but a lot of times because of how much time we spend in the browser, essentially the browser, right? Staying up to date. Then you have your operating system. And then when you probably have heard many of times, especially for folks that are in tech, this whole zero trust solution, right? If you don't know what zero trust means, it's the ability to connect to an open network without a VPN, be able to access your applications, access all of the data, again, without a VPN. So being able to connect and be secure. So imagine like all of these layers of attack surfaces that are available. This is what I'm really highlighting, right? It's that the attack surface has really broadened and widened. And there's a lot that you have to manage in an organization. And this continues to evolve because of all the different vulnerabilities and sort of ransomware attacks that are out there. And by the way, one thing I do want to note, I think this is a really important piece, is Chrome OS as an operating system, I'm not going to say it's not possible for ransomware, but we, to date, have never had a ransomware attack. So in all the 11 years, I know, again, that's just sort of a testament to the platform and security. And what we're asking for is, the IT teams that we work with, right? Enabling this flexibility, all these added layers of protection. A lot of this was not possible with a lot of the old tools that we were using, right? So these tools have to evolve. Whether you're connecting, again, with your corporate passwords to personal apps and sites, Google's come up with different ways to detect, for example, if you use your corporate password on a third-party site, we instantly will notify that user that you have to now change your password. All right, so there's definitely these built-in security hooks that we've added into our products. Everything from zero-day vulnerabilities, to I mentioned phishing scams, connecting to unsecure networks. Chrome Enterprise really helps minimize the attack surface overall. And as I mentioned earlier, people now prefer to have the option to work anywhere, everywhere, and it's become more important to not only attract and also retain talent. Right? I'm hearing that across the board. In a recent FlexJob survey, over half of the respondents, so 52% of men, 60% of women, said that they would quit their jobs if they were not allowed to continue to remotely work. And to accommodate this rise in sort of like this remote work, security needs to be a lot more proactive, right? And a lot more proactive than reactive in this case. And IT teams need to be able to monitor and manage from essentially one central place in the cloud. And when I also highlight proactive, I'm talking about all the things that you have to do to manage not only the users, the applications, the endpoints. I mentioned all these security benefits. All of this sort of happens, in its current state today on devices, that Google produces, and it's a lot simpler because all of these attack surfaces have been eliminated. So I mentioned earlier, the notion of having to have antivirus, anti-malware, encryption. You don't need all of those things because we've basically eliminated all of those elements as part of the operating system, as part of our platform. If you have questions on what we do to mitigate a lot of those things, I'd be happy to chat with you afterwards today. And then another big game changer is the ability to centrally see all of this information in one place, right? This has probably been one of the biggest asks that I've had over the course of the pandemic. It's just reporting. Because now you have all of this data, right? The analytics, whether folks are productive or not, if they're efficient, it's all essentially part of this reporting piece. And in addition to being more flexible, we need security to also happen automatically behind the scenes. So on our platform today, a lot of the security elements happen without doing anything on the device. They happen seamlessly behind the scenes. And then gone are the days where businesses can wait months, right, to actually update their platforms. Right? So staying always up to date is definitely one of the big pieces that I'll highlight. And taking a look at sort of the bigger security picture, I do want to highlight something today, which is, I mentioned, and I saw only very few hands that were raised, was Chrome OS Flex. So we have a table set up. I'm asking everybody to stop by and say hi and have a conversation, but we actually acquired a company out of New York. For those of you that don't know, it's Cloud Ready or Neverwhere. This is about 2 years ago, and it's Chrome OS Flex. And imagine being able to take your MacBook, your Windows PC, convert it to an actual Chromebook. Not only is this a great sustainability approach, because you can actually repurpose and also extend the life of your hardware, the devices, but a lot of organizations have taken this approach to, from a security perspective, right, to then harden their platforms and do it this way. And then I did highlight real quick, there was a hotel recently that, within 48 hours, able to transition, because of a ransomware attack, convert their entire platform over to Chrome OS Flex. I know I'm out of time, but I want to thank everybody for today's session. I look forward to meeting folks, and thank you all.